Chapter 5. Zeon. Sovereign Degwin Soto Zabi, the nominal ruler of Zeon, looked far older than his actual years. For nearly 10 years, real power had rested in his eldest son, Jiren. After seizing power from the revolutionary Zeon Daikun, Degwin had successfully reigned for a while by appeasing the members of the Daikun faction. But then some of his own more hardline supporters accused him of being too idealistic and out of touch with the real world. They formed a separate faction in the Zeon Assembly that supported not Degwin, but his son Jiren, and they succeeded in reducing Degwin's role to that of a virtual puppet. 3 days before the death of his youngest son, Garma, Degwin Zabi received a video letter. "Father," Garma said in it, "I'd hate to have my countrymen laugh at me if I someday become general or supreme commander and say it's just because I'm the son of the nation's leader. Be patient, father, and I promise I'll distinguish myself in war and achieve the rank of general on my own merits." It was a message from a pure-hearted youth, and it warmed Degwin's heart. Garma, it seemed, had inherited many of the virtues of his gentle mother, Narcia. How different he was from his brothers and sisters. Out of concern for Garma's development, Degwin had kept the Zeon media away from him until he entered the officers' academy. But when a news tape was finally released announcing his matriculation, Garma became a national idol overnight. His delicate, almost nervous features conveyed great nobility. The tone of his voice sometimes made him seem a little aloof, but he chose his words carefully and always addressed his countrymen with kindness. No matter what the situation, his public speeches began with the sentence, "Thank you, friends, for giving me the opportunity to address you." And as almost everyone on Zeon seemed to know, he was fond of saying in private that although he was the baby of the Zabi family, he was not going to let anyone take him for granted. Needless to say, Garma's public popularity gave his father immense, almost childlike pleasure. Degwin had become a mere puppet on Zeon, but through Garma he secretly hoped to control his oldest son, Jiren. It was the vain hope of an overly doting father, and it was dashed with Garma's death. "Father, what are you doing?" It was Degwin's daughter, Rear Admiral Kycilia. "Please get up. The people are waiting for your appearance at the funeral ceremonies." Degwin muttered, "Why, of course," and slowly stood, feeling as if an enormous weight had descended on his shoulders. He looked at Kycilia, and she seemed to read his thoughts. "If you don't perform your duties as the sovereign of Zeon today, father," she said icily, "we'll lose control over our subjects." It was hard for Degwin to get up and walk out there, but he had to if he did not want to hear any more snide reminders of his figurehead role from his own daughter. The crowd began to chant "Zabi," and the roar of their 200,000 voices shook the air. Funeral cannon were fired, and then the chants were suddenly accompanied by the thunder of the crowd stamping their feet. The enormous vibrations shook the colony's artificial earth and for a nanosecond or two skewed the axis around which it revolved. Looking out over the crowd from a giant center stage, Degwin noticed how young most of them seemed, and he began to grind his teeth in frustration. With this kind of support, and with Garma's help, he thought, he would surely have been able to depose Jiren. A 50-meter square portrait of Garma Zabi had been placed atop an altar in the middle of the stage, and it was surrounded by cascading flower arrangements on either side. Degwin strode forth, sat down in the throne reserved for him, and gazed out again at the giant assembly before him. There were at least 200,000 people gathered, and 20 million more watching the televised speech. "Garma, my son," he whispered, thinking again that if only Garma were still alive, they might really have been able to counter Jiren. It was a good thing Garma's mother, Narcia, had passed away before all this happened. If she had been alive, she would probably have gone insane. As the nominal sovereign of Zeon, Degwin sat at the center of the stage. To his right and below him were arrayed his remaining children, Jiren, Dazzle, and Kycilia, in that order. Below and to his left were top government officials and other Zabi family members. Why did the citizens of Zeon support Jiren Zabi and his evil ways? One reason was that he was always careful to appoint people unrelated to the Zabi family to positions of power in the government and military. Many were pure Zabi puppets, but some were also talented, brilliant men with new-type potential, such as the 42-year-old Darshia Baharo, the current Prime Minister of Zeon. Now delivering the opening address to the Assembly, he was perfectly suited for his job and was beloved by the people of Zeon. He was also a testimony to the success of Supreme Commander Giran Zabi's deliberate strategy to preserve his own power. On stage, Dazzle Zabi whispered bitterly to his elder sister Cecilia, standing to his right. "I hear you're planning to take Sharaznable under your wing, sister. I don't like it. I cashiered him as an example to my men. It won't look good." "Well, you kicked him out, didn't you?" Cecilia defiantly hissed back. "Why should it concern you what I do with him? There's no problem with it legally. He wasn't able to protect Garma, and you've punished him enough." But how do you think Garma would feel?" "That was then, and this is now. Lieutenant Commander Char has extraordinary abilities. We can't afford to waste them." While this interchange took place, their father, Sovereign Degwin Zabi, publicly expressed his profound sadness at the death of his beloved son and noted his gratitude to the Zeon citizenry, who so clearly shared his sentiments. Then representatives of each sector of society read seemingly endless speeches of mourning, and the whispered spats among the Zabi siblings continued. "Dazzle, you've made your point with Cecilia," Giran said with an utterly expressionless face. "If you're really worried how Garma would have felt, keep your nose out of this business. Remember, Garma was also one of those naive people who actually believed Zeon Zum Daikun was mankind's savior." I know. He was an idealist," Dazzle replied. "But frankly, he was the type of person even I would have felt honored to serve under. I'd even hoped he would rise to the rank of general or admiral." "Understand how I feel, Giran. You're a politician, a plotter. But Garma wasn't like that. He could have become a real military leader." My, how blunt you are, brothers," Cecilia whispered, laughing softly, "and how respectful of your brother's spirit." Sovereign Degwin Zabi sat down on his throne and resumed staring vacantly out at the crowd before him. From a distance it gave him the look of a rather dignified father figure, but in the eyes of his son Giran, Degwin was lower than human filth, a constant thorn in his side. Giran had heard a rumor that Prime Minister Darshia had been talking with his father, and if it was true, it meant his father could become a major obstacle to his plans. Things would go a lot better, he thought, if only the funeral ceremony were being held for his father, Degwin Sotozabi, instead of his brother Garma. Then the crowd of 200,000 began chanting, "Giran Zabi, our supreme commander," and stomping with their feet. It was Giran's turn to state his thanks for statements of mourning delivered by the people's representatives. He stood up straight and walked over to the podium on the stage, his tall, erect bearing giving him an air of nobility, and he spoke, "Honorable citizens of Zeon, listen. Understand their loss." This they appreciated. The Supreme Commander would give them an uplifting speech about the responsibilities they all shared and a goal to pursue. He would give them a sense of direction and, at least for the time being, help them forget their pain and suffering. "I know you have all lost friends and lovers, parents and children, in the war, and I know you mourn your loss. But let me ask you, since the Battle of Roum, is it not possible that we have all become too soft? Is it not possible that some of us have even begun to secretly believe there is nothing wrong with submitting to the Federation, given their size and overwhelming material superiority? It is time to reaffirm our convictions. We, the people of Zeon, are a chosen people. Why should we even think of giving in to Federation corruption? Never forget what Zeon Zum Daikun, the heroic founder of our nation, taught us." In reality, it bothered Giran to have to use Zeon Zum Daikun's name. Zeon Daikun had been a revolutionary and one of the first to advocate the right of the colonies to govern themselves. Now that he had been enshrined as a near deity by the people, his name was essential in public speeches like this. The peoples of space have always looked upon Earth as the birthplace of all mankind, as a sacred place that needs careful protection. In order to save it, it was necessary for us to leave it. But some of the older generations refused to leave. They continue to try to control and rule us, the space people, from Earth. They do not realize that the vastness and infinity of the universe works to expand our awareness, and that it teaches us we no longer needed to be connected to the old earthbound generations. What, after all, can we, the new space generations, do under the control of the old Earth generations? We need to remove the Earth generations, to protect the sacredness of Earth, and to lead mankind into eternal prosperity. We may dwell in a solar system that is only a remote speck in the galaxy, but we are nonetheless the torchbearers of civilization. As you know, this is the reason the Zeon nation was founded. Why then do some of you, merely because of your personal difficulties or the death of your relatives, think of submitting to the old Earth generation? Remember the spirit in which the Zeon nation was founded. Side 3, the frontier most distant from Earth, is the side your mothers and fathers elected to live on. It is here that the chosen race of mankind began. None of us can ever forget the powerful speech given by Zeon Daikun, titled to the new people. As he said, "Never forget, the people of Zeon are a chosen people. It is our destiny to forever protect all of mankind." Lieutenant Commander Charaznable, unable to protect his superior, Garma Zabi, incurred the wrath of Vice Admiral Dazzle Zabi, and was cashiered from the mobile assault forces. But shortly thereafter he received a visit from an officer in Rear Admiral Caecilia's guards, who offered him the rank of commander. Rear Admiral Caecilia, the officer had said, is extremely interested in the fact you've had contact with the Flanagan Agency about new types. She wants you to proceed immediately to the Balda colony on Side 6 and initiate talks with them for her. He then added that a new mobile cruiser, the Zanzibar, had been readied for Shar, and as he proudly noted, it was vastly superior to the standard Musai-class cruiser in both maneuverability and power. Its smooth outline, compared to the uneven, protrusion-covered surface of the Musai, also allowed for greatly improved armor. Is there a time factor involved? Shar asked. Yes, sir. For the last 6 months or so, Rear Admiral Caecilia has been receiving some very specific information from the Flanagan Agency, and she has used it to help develop what we call the Saikamu, sir. The Saikamu? Shar feigned ignorance, although he already knew about the weapon interface. He did not particularly like the young officer's obsequious manner. I can't discuss the matter here with you, sir, the officer replied. You'd best ask Dr. Flanagan directly at the agency. Shar thought to himself, Commander is nice, but everyone is so protocol-obsessed around here. I wish they'd made me a captain instead. He almost said it out loud, but thought better of it. He had other reasons for accepting this assignment besides the promotion, and one of them he would not have admitted under the pain of death. By going to Side 6, he would get to see Lala's son again. We also have some mobile armor we'd like you to deliver to the Flanagan Agency, sir. An engineer on the Zanzibar will brief you on it. Mobile armor? It was a term Shar had never heard. Yes, sir. It's different from a traditional mobile suit. It replaces suits that rely primarily on traditional means of delivering their firepower. It's composed of 2 components, the Elmeth and its support units, bits. Shar nodded. How interesting, he thought, that although Vice Admiral Dazzle Zabi seemed to have absolutely no interest in the new type theories, Caecilia Zabi appeared to be thinking already about forming an operational combat corps of potential new types. After formally accepting his new commission and his new orders from this exceedingly polite, cautious officer, Shar boarded the Zanzibar and took off from Zeon's Zoom City colony for Balda Bay on Side 6. During the trip, the ship's engineer, Lieutenant Muramasa, showed him the Elmeth. It was stowed in the Zanzibar's hangar next to his beloved Red Zaku, which Caecilia had apparently been able to retrieve from Dozle. To his surprise, the Elmeth was utterly unlike any mobile suit he had ever seen. It had no arms or legs and bore a faint resemblance to an old-style aircraft. And it was equipped with only 2 mega-particle cannons. Muramasa nonetheless boasted, if everything goes according to plan, this thing'll be one hell of a weapon. Even better than the Red Comet? Shar asked sarcastically. Well, it depends on the pilot, of course, but I don't see why not. As Lieutenant Muramasa filled Shar in on the specs of the new machine, he spoke. Persuasively, and with conviction, more than the hardware itself, Char found himself again awed by the new type concept of humans on which the machine relied. The first pilot scheduled to use the Elmeth bit system, he thought, would have to be an extraordinary person. Side 6, or Leah, as it was also known, was governed by the rank administration and generally regarded as neutral territory. But the truth was far more complex. If the Principality of Zeon prevailed in the war, it would need a safe base from which to control the defeated Federation territory. Giran, Kycilia, and the other Zabi leaders had therefore deliberately spared Side 6 from the destruction and co-opted the supposedly autonomous rank administration. Side 6 was in reality a Zeon puppet. "And how is Lala's son?" Char asked in the lobby of the Flanagan Agency. "A wonderful girl. The best, in fact," Dr. Flanagan replied with a slight grin. As on the first time he had met Dr. Flanagan, Char felt a negative reaction. For a 70-year-old engaged in the supposedly noble profession of science, the man was far too worldly. But, as Char had to admit, it was probably that same quality that had enabled him to ingratiate himself with Kycilia and achieve recognition for his organization. "Well," he said, "that's good to hear." He had had a strange feeling about Lala's son when he had first encountered her as a newly orphaned young woman in this strange place some time earlier. Something about her had made him think she might have some sort of new type potential, and now that he sensed he had been right, he could already see new possibilities emerging. It made him feel good when his hunches played out, and now, with Kycilia Zabi backing the Flanagan Agency, the wheel of fortune might slowly be turning in his favor. "In looking at your combat record, Commander, it's even occurred to me that you might have new type potential. I'm a down-to-earth type of man, Doctor, and frankly I don't believe in supermen or new types. I'm just bringing you the Elmeth bit system from Rear Admiral Kycilia Zabi for testing. I want to meet the Elmeth pilot and run the test. We don't have much time. Commander, I must say I'm surprised by your words. That I don't believe in new types?" Char repeated the line for effect. Char felt Flanagan's doubting eyes trying to probe through his face mask and further. Resolved never to trust the man fully, he clearly had his own agenda. But that did not mean Char had abandoned hopes for the research the scientists' team was doing. If new types ever went beyond the theoretical stage and were proved in practice, he knew they could also be used as a real weapon to topple the Zabi family and even control the Earth Federation. If not, he never would have entrusted Lala's son to a man like Flanagan. New-type humans were still a vague idea, but if they possessed even limited special powers, it was only a matter of time before someone employed them in combat. With individually piloted mobile suits now the centerpiece of modern warfare strategy, there would be plenty of places to apply their talents. The Flanagan Agency, an intelligence organization, could be put to great use performing needed research. Char would use the worldly Flanagan and in turn be used by him. He would just have to deal with the man carefully from a position of strength. Then Char heard the sound of silk brushing against silk. He turned and saw Lala's son. "Well, if it isn't Char Aznable," Lala's clear voice resonated pleasantly in his ears. She wore a pale yellow one-piece outfit with long, billowing sleeves trailing in the air as she walked, and it made her tawny skin appear almost glistening black. There was something quite incongruous about the sight of her in the impersonal lobby of an agency charged with developing new fighters for the Zeon forces. Smack in the middle of her forehead, almost like the light-emitting third eye of a bodhisattva, was a beauty mark. Her real eyes were emerald green and hinted at an ancestry more complex than that of most Asians. Her limbs moved with grace as she glided directly up to him. She lacked any natural fragrance and had an altogether ethereal quality to her. Turning to Dr. Flanagan, a shocked Char exclaimed in spite of himself, "This potential pilot you've been talking about for the Elmeth bit system. You meant Lala, didn't you?" "Correct." When Flanagan replied, his eyes probed the proper-looking Char with a lecherous look as if to ask, "Well, don't you think she's developed into a fine woman in the 6 months since you last saw her?" Now, about the performance of new types, Professor. Shar looked into Lala's eyes and wished he had not started to say it, but it was too late, and besides, he could not restrain the impulse to mock Flanagan a little. As he paused, Lala laughed as if she understood and seemed to urge him on. Do you think it makes a difference, he continued, secretly thrilled, if they're virgins or not? Caught off guard, Flanagan looked away in embarrassment. Perhaps, he thought with fear, Shar could read his thoughts. He had spent too much time studying people with paranormal abilities, from potential new types to those purported to have real superpowers, not to be suspicious. That's a difficult question, he answered, flustered. We really don't have enough test samples to yield solid data yet, idea, Shar said with a grin. It occurred to Flanagan then that Char himself might be a true new type. They generally had remarkably refined insight, which they often referred to as hunches. Until he knew exactly what sort of ability Char had, he would have to engage him with extreme care. Well, Char said, as if further confirming Flanagan's suspicion. How is she? There's no doubt about it, Commander. You were absolutely on target in recommending Lala-san. She's a second-generation space colonist from the Room colony on Side 5, and although her family was killed later in flight, the very fact that they were spared during the Battle of Room may in large measure be due to Lala's own considerable abilities. Shar could tell from the way Flanagan was talking that Lala had been forced to retell her own history more than once. The poor kid, he thought, feeling a twinge of guilt. He knew such painful memories were normally best left alone, and that he himself was partly responsible for their being dredged up. You've done well, Lala, he said. Thank you, Commander, she replied clearly, looking up at him. Somehow their exchange left Dr. Flanagan with no doubts. He knew he was not witnessing any ordinary infatuation. The relationship between Shar and Lala was characterized more by a type of tension, the type that occurs when two psyches suddenly click together perfectly. It was a powerful bond. In a laboratory, one of the agency's younger scientists gave Char a formal presentation on the progress of their research. There was some machinery and, somewhat distanced from it, a 10-cubic-meter transparent glass enclosure with about 20 mechanical manipulators inside. Standing before the machinery, the researcher first noted how honored he felt in the presence of Zeon's famous commander, and then began his explanation. His cheeks were flushed with excitement. First of all, he said, pointing, this mechanism, which we call the PSICOM, is used to conduct brain waves. The extremely weak electrical signals emitted by a human brain are detected by this receiver, amplified, and then transmitted to the controls that operate the manipulators. We say transmitted, but in reality the brain waves themselves become an integral part of the electrical oscillation that drives the manipulators. Can't you just show us how it works? Shar asked. Why yes, sir. On Dr. Flanagan's order, the young researcher began to double-check the connections on the machine. As he traced each lead wire running into the amplifier, his cheeks reddened even more. The whole process took so long, they could easily have had a cup of coffee. Lala, Shar asked, tell me, does this thing always take so long to set up? She laughed and replied in the affirmative. Turning to Dr. Flanagan, Shar asked, does a fear coefficient or any type of coefic negative event adversely affect the device's operation? It does, and we know this for certain. For example, when Lala used the system to handle dead animals, she would emit a negative reaction, which limited effectiveness to a degree. In fact, her negative reaction is even stronger than that of the average human. Char said. That makes sense, I suppose. Then he suddenly asked Lala, what kind of corpses did they have you handle? Frogs, rats, rabbits, horses, and humans. She replied so matter-of-factly that Char decided not to pursue the matter further. When the young researcher resumed his presentation, he noted that the manipulators in the enclosure could move faster and with greater precision than a human hand. I'm now going to release one fly and one mosquito, he announced. Lala, I'd like you to catch them as soon as you can. He then inserted the insects into the enclosure from an opening in one side. They were so small that they were hard to see, but Char could tell there was definitely something flying around inside. Lala donned a special cap containing the receiver circuitry and stared inside the glass enclosure. Seconds later, one of the manipulators in the case suddenly moved. The researcher announced, "Both of the insects have been caught," then added in a somewhat disappointed tone, "but crushed." Shar had to ask, "You mean sometimes the hands don't crush them?" "Yes, sir. The flies, at least." The manipulators had responded almost instantly and precisely and demonstrated the Psychomy system's astounding ability to amplify brainwaves. Lala had operated the manipulators without having to move her hands or feet. Shar stepped closer to the enclosure. He turned around and looked at Lala, seated several meters away. Then he inspected the manipulators she had operated. Sure enough, between the fingers of one of them was a fly and a mosquito. "Well, I'll be," he whispered to himself. Turning to Lala, he smiled. "This is incredible. In the beginning it used to wear me out. Now I can do it any time. But isn't operating mobile armor a lot harder than this?" It was Flanagan's turn to make an icy comment. "Her Excellency Caecilia loaned the agency a simulator, Commander, sir. Using it, Lala has already become an expert pilot of the mobile armor, sir." "Dr. Flanagan, forgive the way I acted earlier. I was out of line. But do me a favor. I may be a commander in the Zeon forces, but you don't need to be so formal with me. I'm almost young enough to be your grandson. Can we agree?" Flanagan uttered a strained laugh and said, "I didn't mean to sound too obsequious, Commander. I'll try not to be overly polite." "Good. Let's get back to business then, and attach this psychomu device to the Elmeth bit system. We have to let Lala get used to it." "Understood, Commander," Flanagan said. "We'll speed things up." He extended his right hand, and for the first time the two men shook hands. When the test with Lala and the psychomu was over, Shar invited her to join him in the agency's dining room. She was now formally under his command as he carried a commission for her, signed by Rear Admiral Caecilia, which made her an ensign. His real task was to introduce her into actual combat and turn her into a true soldier for Zeon. Right now she still looked too much like an innocent young girl. There were only 4 or 5 of the agency's off-duty researchers relaxing in the room, all engrossed in a video broadcast of the speech Giran Zabi had given at Garma's funeral. "The old generations of the Earth Federation have no vision, and if we place our trust in them, mankind is doomed. They speak only of a vague notion that somehow their system of government by absolute democracy and a perfect parliament will result in peace and happiness for mankind. But their system leads only to more incompetence of every sort and to continued overpopulation. And the result? Instead of an enlightened civilization, the Federation is producing a race of incompetents who will multiply out of control, upset the balance of nature, and defile our universe. History shows that when the members of any given animal population, be it rats, locusts, or ants, increase too much and reach an abnormal level in the natural order of things, that species instinctively knows enough to commit mass suicide or abandon itself to the gardener of natural selection. This is the most virtuous, altruistic act any form of life can perform for the good of nature. Yet what of mankind? Simply because he has intelligence, he insults nature with his arrogance. And he becomes lazy. The Zeon nation, however, with your united support and your powers of perception, has struck a blow for nature. For the last 8 months we have helped atone for the sins of mankind against nature. I know you all remember why. Well, I hope you don't mind if I go ahead and eat then. No, of course not. Please, be my guest. Their table was in one of the best spots in the dining hall, bathed in natural sunlight beamed in from outside the colony. Since the atmosphere of Balda City was kept at the same temperature at the 45th parallel on Earth, it felt like spring everywhere. Giran's speech continued. Remember, honorable citizens of Zeon, that our beloved Garma has joined your friends and relatives and died for the cause. Why did he sacrifice himself? Shar muttered to himself, because he was a naive kid. Did you say something? Lala asked, unable to hear him clearly. She showed absolutely no interest in the broadcast, and had been gazing outside the dining hall. There were so many things she wanted to ask him, but she did not know where to begin. She was beginning to get irritated with herself. "No," Char replied, with a gentle smile. Girin's speech was just reaching its climax. Garma Zabi died to spur those of us who have tired of fighting to greater effort. Garma, the Garma you loved, died crying out to us not to let our warriors die in vain. He died shouting, "Glory to Zeon." Why? Because he knew that you, the wise people of Zeon, are the true people, the chosen race in this world. Yes, he died shouting, "Glory to Zeon." Open your eyes, fellow citizens. Now more than ever, we must unite and strike at the enfeebled Federation. Lala, yes, I know the researchers at the agency must have inspected every pore in your body and analyzed every memory you have. I want to apologize. You don't need to, Commander, she said, placing her hand on top of his and shaking her head. When my parents died, I was devastated. You gave me a reason to go on living, and I'm grateful for it. And besides, this assignment means I'll be with you. I'm happy. That makes me feel better, Lala. I was picked up by a Zeon warship after I lost my mother and father, and I did whatever I had to survive until I arrived here at SI-6. I had no choice. And it was the same after I got here. I'm just grateful that I met you as soon as I did, before I became a physical and mental wreck. Now I'm going to be working with you. Just think of it. Suddenly I've even been made an ensign. Somehow Lala managed to laugh. Funny how fate works, isn't it? Char said, smiling with her. He could imagine what she had been through in the 2 months before he had met her, and he knew it must have been rough. She still had the look of a young girl, but her face was almost too beautiful. She was the type of woman who drove men crazy. I'm no saint, or even a gentleman, Lala. I'm just like other men, and I've no right to criticize the way you've lived. But I keep wondering what your life was like before this all happened. She said nothing, merely stared at Char's mask. He looked into her eyes and saw something terribly honest. He knew that there was more he had to say, but also that he would have to take off the mask in order to continue. He was silent for a second, and then looked around the dining hall. The broadcast of Jiren's speech was over, and everyone else had left. He removed his mask and turned to Lala. She squinted as if staring at something bright. How did it happen?" she asked, referring to the deep scar that ran diagonally across his forehead. "In a fencing match with a man called Garma Zabi when I was in Officers' Academy." It was a lie. Char had deliberately done it to himself before even entering the school. It had been part of his oath of revenge. In order to get close to the Zabi family in the future, he knew he would have to hide his real identity. An ugly scar would help distract people from noticing any trace of his father's features and even give him a pretext to wear a face mask. But the pain was something he would never forget. Frankly, Lala, I nearly managed to forget about you on a personal level over the last 6 months. But now, seeing you again, I like what I see. Tell me, what do you think of me?" Lala stared at Char. His eyes seemed so clear. "This is about as romantic as I ever get," he said. He suddenly felt very young. It was sad, but at the same time his rational mind was warning him to be careful. I'll do my best for you, Commander." Lala chose her words very carefully, but tears began to well up in her eyes. "Right now, I'm very, very happy."